Hello, my name is Josephine Laing, and I am so grateful for this opportunity to talk about our shift that's taking place in our human consciousness, in our human evolution. And for my own part, the shift that I really see that's happening is in our acceptance of our psychic ability. Our psychic ability is our natural birthright. It's something that all of us have, or if we haven't had a direct experience, we know someone whom we love and trust who has had an experience of psychic ability. It can be as simple as knowing who's calling on the telephone, or as profound as having a visitation from a deceased loved one. These experiences really mark and change our lives, and though they're not provable or repeatable, they are definitely real, and we all experience them. So different families have different propensities. Some families are better at music or at mathematics, and the children in those families are often better at music or mathematics. In my family line, on both sides, I happen to have psychic ability. And so I had a number of family members who expressed pretty strong psychic capabilities. I had a grandfather who was a dowser, which is a type of psychic ability that is actually very well accepted in places where otherwise psychic ability is not accepted, because people all need water for their farms and for their wells. And my mother was a premonition dreamer. My father was a reincarnation child, and I have a brother who's also a premonition dreamer and had strong premonitions. And I myself felt a little left out as I was growing up until my mother passed away, and I was bereft without her in my life, and I couldn't see how I could go on. And so my grandmother gathered me up in my grief and took me outdoors, and there, walking amongst the great trees beside the lake which I grew up on, I had an experience of something. It was a still day with high clouds, and there was something that was disturbing the trees overhead, and I couldn't be certain what it was, and in my grief it kept interrupting me and almost bothering me, and I kept looking up. And finally my grandmother said, "Darling, what is it that's going on there?" And I said, "Well, there's something up in those trees that's disturbing it, and I don't know what it is." And she just said, "Oh, that would be the angels." And as soon as she said that word, angels, I understood that that was indeed what had happened, and that the angels had come not only for me to help me to overcome my grief, but also had come for my mother to greet her and to help her move on to the other side. And with that, I began to see them in a sort of a gossamer presence, and they circled 3 or 4 more times above, high overhead, at the top of those very tall trees. And then they flew off to the east, and the further they got, the more clearly I could see them, until when they were quite some distance away, they looked like large birds flying away. And it was a real profound experience for me, and I knew at that time that I had joined my family in an unusual experience for the very first time. And you know, our lives are filled with problems, and those are good things. They are actually blessings in disguise. We need our problems. They teach us. That's how we learn and grow. And my particular curriculum has been injuries. And other people might have relationship issues or financial problems or all of them, disease, health, whatever it is. But in my situation with my injury tendency towards injuries, I had a very unique experience where I was able to work with a particular chiropractor who did muscle testing. I'm sure many of you know about muscle testing. It's also called applied kinesiology. And it's a technique whereby we can use the muscles of the body to indicate strength or weakness depending on whether a particular healing substance will help a person or will not be of any benefit to them. And I happen to be a particularly good subject for muscle testing, and working with this one chiropractor, my dear beloved friend and mentor Doc, I began to realize that, he began to realize that I was not only an easy tester, but also I had an experience where, while he was away one night on a vacation on a cruise ship, I got this strong impression. I woke up in the middle of the night with tears on my pillow, and I could tell that he was going to have a stroke. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really terrible information. Who wants that information? I certainly didn't. And I just tried my best to forget about it and fell back asleep. Well, that exact experience happened twice more before he returned from his 2-week vacation. And 3 times I woke up with tears on my pillow knowing that information. So when he came back, I said to him, you know, I hesitate to say this, but my mother always said 3 times a charm, and so I'm going to just speak up about it. And I told him, and sure enough, he was able to go about various diagnostics and found that he was quite occluded in one of his carotid arteries and was indeed about to have a stroke. And so he reversed that situation with the advanced warning and was able to correct that. And after that experience, he said, you know, if you knew that about me, what else do you know about other people? And so he and I began this long period of study together where I would come in during his off hours and he would hand me a patient card. Now, he was very good at doing what he did with his patients, but every once in a while there would be somebody who he couldn't quite reach or couldn't quite detect. And so he would use my skills on the off hours to help with those people that he wasn't able to get through to. And I would put my left hand, my receiving hand, on a patient card, and I would just get impressions as to what was going on, or I would know how he could go ahead and proceed with his work and say that if you just tap the body in this place or move this or do that, you'll be able to access this person. Or the problem with this person is that they have had overexposure to commercial table salt and perhaps at a sporting event, and that has caused an allergic reaction to the nervous system, and it's resulting in this however the diagnostic might proceed. And my information as the years went on got more and more detailed and more exacting. And at the time, we didn't know what to call myself. The most recent person who was doing something like this was Edgar Casey, who would do this in pretty much in a sleep state, lying on a sofa and falling asleep, and somebody would take notes as to what he would say to give advice to his patients and clients who came to receive help and benefit. But I was doing this in a conscious state, and we didn't know really what to call myself, sort of a psychic healer or something like that. We just called me a colleague in the office, because Dr. Otto would say, you know, if there's somebody that was needing my assistance, he'd say to them, well, let me just check with a colleague of mine. And I would occasionally come into the patient room with him, but that was not very common. Mostly I just worked in his off hours, and we worked about 10 or 12 hours a week together. And it was a really wonderful opportunity and experience for me. And in that crucible of his office, I was able to really refine my psychic skills. I would be able to tell if something was arising out of my memory, if it was something that I recalled from perhaps a former patient, or if it was something that was truly coming through as a psychic skill, as a psychic gift. And as a result, I found that it was the psychic information that was always much more accurate. And he was able to proceed using that information to assist many people. His office, he usually had a long line of people waiting out there at dawn. People would actually line up at 4 in the morning. He started at 6 with drop-ins, and they would line up as early as 4. Children wrestled from their beds and brought in the car to go ahead and wait for an appointment with him, because he was that good at what he did. And I was very blessed to be able to assist him in the areas where he was unable to proceed. So it was a great gift that came to me. And it was as a result of my own problems, which were my injuries, because that got me in the office in the first place to go ahead and work on my own health and healing. And it was a very fruitful relationship, and good for both of us. And as the years went on, I began to, Carolyn Mace began to move through with her lecture series, and she called herself a medical intuitive. And I suggested that name for Doc, but he didn't care for it very much, because our work was not so much in line with what the medical profession usually uses for health and healing, which is often prescription medications or surgeries. It was much more along the lines of natural alternative therapies like herbs and various holistic practices, that homeopathics and various techniques that can be used to help the body to find its own path back to healing. So we decided that we actually preferred the term clairvoyant healer, and that's what I usually use now, although I will still sometimes use medical intuitive, because that has entered the vernacular. So our problems do become our blessings, and some time ago Doc passed away. And I have gone on to go ahead and serve. I've been serving as a clairvoyant healer now for nearly 30 years. And I've helped thousands of people to heal from hard to diagnose and chronic health issues from around the world. I've had calls from, I think actually every continent on the globe, including Antarctica, which is pretty fun to get a call from Murdoch Station as to what somebody might need help with their health and healing. And so I love my work, and that's another wonderful thing. We need to have our work be our joy and our inspiration. It has to be what we'd love to do more than anything else. And my husband Frank used to tease me years ago when Doc would call to see if I was free to come over and work on an afternoon when he had the office closed. I'd come home from doing whatever I'd done, and Frank would say, "He called!" And I'd race off to the phone to call him back and see if I could run in for work. It was kind of teasing me as if I was a young high school girl waiting for a call from someone that was asking me for a date. And indeed, these were wonderful dates, and we had a great time working together. During the time that I was working for Dr. Otto in a psychic capacity, I had a number of pretty profound injuries that kept me right on track with learning what I was learning to do. And after I had healed from one big injury, another one came on, and then after I'd healed from that, another one followed that. And one of the biggest injuries was a pretty profound head injury. It happened in an automobile accident. And just about, maybe 5 minutes before the accident occurred, I had been driving on a twisty road behind a long line of cars with another car behind me who was a very, very eager driver, really wanted to get ahead, and he was tailgating quite profoundly. And a little voice popped into my head that said, "Pull over and let this one pass." And I thought, why should I bother? We're all in a line. And so I unwisely chose to just flip the rear view mirror of my car up instead so I wouldn't have to look at him. It's funny how we make these choices in life, but that was a choice that I made in that moment. And it wasn't but 5 minutes later that he wound up smashing into the back of a line of parked cars that were waiting for children to cross in a crosswalk from a school. He came over the top of the hill at full speed, about 65 miles an hour, and slammed into all of us, my car first, and we all went ping-ponging around, and fortunately the children had just enough time to all literally dive to safety by the side of the road. But I wanted to share that experience because the voice of our higher self, or the voice of our intuitive nature that can come through very strongly like that, often has that quality of being compassionate and fairly neutral. Even though a situation might be quite urgent, there's not usually those feelings of shame or blame or urgency. In fact, when I feel those kinds of feelings, I usually stop what I'm doing and just not respond. I find that the best thing to do at that time is to go into meditation, to be honest with you, and just see what my higher self might have to say. So I just wanted to share that little bit about how that voice, the quality of that voice. And also to mention that spirit is always with us. The presence of spirit is continuous in our lives, and our spirit guides and helpers are always here to help us, to nudge us gently into the direction that we need to go. And so one of the nudges that I received from spirit came through an inspiration. I thought, here are all of these beautiful medicinal plants that people know about. How did people ever figure out how those plants were able to do what they did? And this was before I knew very much about medicinal herbs and healing using plants. And so I decided to go out into my garden. I happened to have some hypericum growing out there. And I didn't know what hypericum, St. John's wort, did for people, but I thought, well, I'll just sit down with it and meditate and see if I can receive any information from it. So I sat with the hypericum, and to my wondrous surprise, I was able to feel different things in my body and to sense things about what was going on in regards to health and healing. And I think this was because I had been working so extensively with this wonderful doctor friend of mine and was fairly familiar by now about the anatomy and physiology of the body. And this opened up a new window for me about how interconnected we are, all of us, with everything around us. And at the same time that I was doing this sort of work on my own, I had really discovered the importance of self-love. And I feel that self-love is the foundation of a life well lived. And when we love ourselves enough, we give ourselves the gift of what we truly love to do. And what I really wanted to do was to take the time and sit with plants out in the garden, and so I began to do that. And then I also had taken up, because of my injuries, a practice of meditation, because there's only so much sitting around or lying around you can do while you're healing without getting bored. And so I decided to entertain myself with dream interpretation and meditation. And I also found a sanctuary, a place where I could be alone and undisturbed, in a spare room in our home that hadn't been used for much other than storage. And so we went ahead and cleared it out, and I considered that a place where I could go in and just be alone with my thoughts and to do my practices of the dream interpretation and meditation. And I consider those to be 3 of the 4 cornerstones for really developing a self-actualized life. The 4th cornerstone came after that big car accident injury, because I almost died about 8 times after that injury. And on one particular night, when I had done something very imprudent and I realized that I had most likely nearly killed myself and might actually die during the night, I went ahead and found myself down on my knees without any real experience or understanding of divinity, but I just found myself praying to the universe, to whoever, to however, and I said, look, if you'll let me live through this night, I swear I'll do anything, whatever it is, you tell me. And it wasn't 2 or 3 days later that I got my first personal private call as a medical intuitive. And I don't know who had given out my number or how they found out about me. But all of my business since that very first time has been by word of mouth. And I have, since I've done all of these readings, I've never once advertised. I've just allowed people to find me and call me through the connections that they've made. And so there's this vast interconnected network of people who have found me through friends of theirs and then have made the calls, and then they tell their friends, and on it goes. It's a wonderful way to be engaged in this work that I do. So that's when I found the 4th cornerstone of prayer. And then learning about boundaries is a very important aspect of psychic ability as well. We need to learn how to say no when something is not right. I also needed to learn a very specific protocol for my work, which I do every time I do my work. When I reach in deeply for psychic service, I have a very specific preparation that I go through to enable me to enter into that work with clarity. I've also done quite a lot of work on myself in regards to healing memories and learning what's in my subconscious mind so that I can come to my work with clarity and without carrying prior opinions or ideas or biases. So when we have good boundaries, I consider that to be, if we have the floor or the foundation of self-love with the cornerstones of dream interpretation, prayer, sanctuary, and meditation, then our boundaries are like the walls on the house that we're building. And the heart of the home is what I like to call the Great Triple Blessing. And the Great Triple Blessing is our spirituality, plus our psychic ability, plus our true purpose in life. And I feel that when we have that foundation and those walls and cornerstones, the heart becomes alive in the home of our own life. And our spirituality is part of how those cornerstones develop our spirituality as well as our psychic ability. When we are doing our meditation, we are learning how to listen within. We're learning how to still and quiet the mind so that we can listen. When we are doing prayer work, we are imploring the divine or being grateful to divinity or connecting with intentionally with that aspect of our own higher self or of the version of God, Goddess, all that is. When we are doing our dream work, we are engaging our vision center and engaging our clairvoyant function. We are really allowing ourselves to listen to not only our higher self, but also our subconscious mind to bring us information. And we are opening ourselves up to the information of the universe. As I mentioned, my mother was a clairvoyant dreamer. I don't think I mentioned then, but she actually did save our lives on a couple of occasions with her dreams. And so as a child, right from the start, I gained tremendous respect for psychic ability. And it was interesting growing up in my family with so much psychic ability, because psychic ability is often tittered at in polite company. It's not really given much credit or much due. But it is very real. And when a person has had an experience such as I have, where a life was saved or lives were saved, then you really gain a certain respect for it. And I feel that part of our problem is, as humans developing, is that culturally we have quite a bias against psychic ability. We feel that psychic ability is dangerous or something that shouldn't be fooled with. But I think that the main reason why our psychic ability has been so squelched is because people who are listening to their inner guidance, who are really receiving their guidance from their higher self, are much more difficult to control. It's easy to tell somebody what to do if they're not listening within. But if we're listening within and gaining our inspiration from our own true self, then we really have guidance and direction in our lives. And so that's why I feel that that this particular program that has worked so well for me and is so easy for me to teach others, of really having a basis or foundation of self-love and then the cornerstones and the boundaries, really opens and engages that great triple blessing of our spirituality, our psychic ability, and our purpose in life. Because our psychic ability comes as a result of those spiritual practices of prayer and meditation. It enlivens our psychic ability. And then as well, that really engages our spirituality, so that our spirituality can actually protect us and act as a guard at the gate, as it were, to prevent us from going further into our psychic ability without having really gotten the spiritual grounding and understanding that's needed to go ahead and proceed. Then as well, when we are listening within and receiving our inner guidance, our purpose becomes clear to us, and we can move ahead in life, even if the purpose is something that's quite unusual or different, such as mine. At one point, I had a little dream that I woke up with a haiku poem in my head, and the poem was this: "My feet are always falling steadfastly on my path before me." And when I realize that, I see that sometimes if we're given the whole picture of what we're supposed to do or where we're supposed to go, we might be intimidated by it. The dream was of my feet walking in nice snuggly boots in the snow with some evergreen trees nearby, but there were my footprints that I had walked in, and there were my feet right at where I was standing, but then there were also 3 or 4 footprints that extended out in the snow before me. And I saw them there, and that was how I came up with that little haiku poem. And it's been a great guide for me in my life, because I realized at that time that had I had the bigger picture of what I was going to be doing, that I would be serving people around the globe, working in a capacity that had no medical training or no psychic ability training, no training of any sort, but yet just the word of mouth and the trust and the experience that I'd gained to cause people to want to engage my services. And as a result, I've been able to help a great many people, and people have written me many letters and notes to say, how grateful they are, and have encouraged me to continue on. So our psychic ability and our spirituality and our purpose are all intrinsically interrelated together. And I feel that it's really time that we humans begin to acknowledge this. After all, when we have an inspiration, like an artist taking a canvas to a paper, that's psychic ability. That is our psychic inspiration and insight. It's actually our clairvoyant function coming online and letting us know what we want to do. And I think this happens for anybody who's in their true passion and purpose. They have an inspiration, they see what they'd like to do, and then they proceed. That is psychic ability. And people often don't really think of it that way. They don't see it as such, but it really is. Or a dowser when they're walking around with a water witch to find a well, and the stick dips. Of course, that's very psychic, and people don't even acknowledge it that much as such. But I think that our spirituality is what really helps us to move ahead into these realms of our psychic service with skill and with understanding and with ability. And so as I teach, which I have been doing now for nearly 20 years, both private students and classes, I always try to teach the whole program so that people can learn and grow on all fronts as they're developing ahead, embracing the great triple blessing in their lives. And there is a wonderful spiritual tradition from Polynesia, practiced in the Hawaiian Islands. And some of you have probably heard of the Great Kahuna. Well, it's the Huna tradition, and one of the things that I learned about the Hunas, which was very interesting, was that when they were given a child, as is often the case in spiritual traditions, to raise in that tradition, the Hunas would raise that child without any doubt. And it is the presence of doubt in our lives that gets us to question our psychic ability, we need to learn how to trust our psychic ability when it comes forward for us, and to listen and to understand and to take the first thing that we receive and to trust it. And so the kahunas bring a very wonderful lesson to us regarding our psychic ability and embracing our psychic skills. When I was first getting ready to go more public, because I really actually sort of hid under a rock for a great many years, even though I was doing all of this work, distance healing around the world, I didn't really say much of anything about what I was doing to friends or to other people, because psychic ability is so judged in our life, and the judgments are swift and often harsh. And so I didn't mention it really much at all. And then, as I was spending more and more time communing with the trees and with the plants in nature, the trees began to speak to me, and all of the plants did, and they kept saying, Josephine, you know, you need to teach, you need to go forward and tell others about this. You need to help people to begin to embrace their psychic ability in their lives, so that humanity can come to understand our interconnectedness. If people are able to speak with trees and plants and understand that they are sentient beings that have feelings and can communicate amongst each other and with us, we have a different approach to nature in that regard. And our current approach to nature has brought us very close to destruction of so many biomes and our own perfect nest that we live in, this planet Earth. And so it's an opportunity for us to really make a shift in our human evolution, to begin to embrace nature as a companion, as a lover, as a friend, as a mother, as a father, not as something that's just a resource to be exploited and utilized for our benefit, but to be worked with in harmony and with connection with each other in a symbiotic relationship. So this is one of the main reasons why I feel such a strong passion for pursuing, helping people to understand and to find their own psychic ability from within themselves, to be able to understand this interconnection. And when I first came out to begin to do my teaching in a more public arena, I was quite intimidated by it. And I, filled out the forms and began to submit them, and I was going to be teaching at the local community college and in the community programs at our local college. And I got a little bit of cold feet. And at the last minute, when I came right down to the final phone call that I had to make to go forth to say, this is what I'd like to do. I'd like to teach a class on communing with plants. I thought, they're going to think I'm crazy. I don't know if I can do this. And I decided to go out into the backyard and to meditate on it and to think about it. And I said to nature, if you'd like me to do this, I need a sign and I need it now. And so I sat down on a chair in our backyard, and my little cat, Fluffy, came and sat beside me, and she's quite a hunter and she can really jump, and we try not to ever let her catch birds because she's quite ferocious. And so Fluffy came up and sat beside me, and I thought, oh, here's Fluffy, hi, thanks for coming over, and I thought, well, we'll just see. And one of the things that's important to do when we are seeking from nature is to listen. It's a sort of like listening for a bird song. You want to just clear your mind, and like if you practice it right now, if you just take a moment and just listen as if maybe you'd heard a bird, you'll notice that there's a little space there where there aren't any thoughts. And that's a really wonderful little moment. And so as Fluffy came up and sat beside me, I was just like, oh, here's Fluffy. And I was in a little spot between thoughts. And all of a sudden, this hummingbird came zooming up to my forehead and stopped, I'm not exaggerating, about 8 inches right in front of me. And ferociously, the wing beats just, brrr, and I thought, what is this? It really startled me. And then I thought, oh my gosh, this bird could be in danger with Fluffy right here. But Fluffy was just as startled as I was. And we both were just looking at this hummingbird. And all of a sudden I realized, oh, what if this is my message from nature? Because I had just demanded, with my sense of command, a message. And here was this bird. And as soon as I realized that, I quieted for just a moment and paused in a receptive way. And I heard in my inner ear the words, be seen. Just like this bird was doing to me. It was being seen. And I had to be seen. And so I decided to gather up my courage, and then as soon as I got the message from the hummingbird, it zoomed away. not taking another moment in danger's reach. And I got up on shaky knees and I walked in and I made that call and I began teaching publicly. And now I've been doing that for many years, and I have a radio show that airs weekly. That's an online radio show. And I speak of all of these topics of our various aspects of psychic ability, be it reincarnation, or, like I said, my father was a reincarnation child, or what we have to overcome to clear ourselves, our grief or our projections or our own psychology, to become clear channels for our psychic ability. Or health and healing, generals on that, just so that we can keep ourselves clear to be good channels and to be able to perceive on other people's behalf. And of course, I also cover dreams and prayer and meditation and self-love and psychic ability and spirituality and purpose. So these are the things that I feel that we really need to embrace in our human development, and they will not only guide us truly on our path, but they will protect us through our spiritual understandings, and they will direct us where we need to go for the life of that we would truly love to live, a life that's rich with psychic ability. And so in closing, I would just like to say that a little creed that I have come upon for myself is to trust the universe, to listen within, and to stay in our joy. Because our joy, just like my work with early work with Doc, is what will guide us, or talking to plants is what will take us right where we need to go. It is our inspiration and our passion. So trust the universe, listen within, and stay in your joy. So thank you very much for this opportunity, and I hope that this little video has been of benefit to you. And my name again is Josephine Laing, and my website is stepintomagic.com. Thank you so much for listening.